This beauty world. I am Syed Shabahat and you're watching Fault Lines. The diplomatic relationship between Pakistan and United States is both difficult and significant. It is difficult because both the countries do not see eye to eye on a number of subjects. And it is significant because the United States is one of the most important powers in the world, one that Pakistan cannot afford to ignore. In a recent statement in Congress, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that there are multiplicity of interest when it comes to Afghanistan between Pakistan and United States. This is very unfortunate because Pakistan has played a very significant role in the safe withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan. And even in this week, when Antony Blinken gave this statement, Pakistan's top leadership is involved in Central Asian Republic and settlement of a peace process for Afghanistan. Watch the package prepared by my team before I bring the first guest to the program.
The Afghan Endgame presents another test to mercurial Pakistan-US ties spanning 70 years of uneasy partnership. Followed by Taliban's lightning advance, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has stated that Washington is reanalyzing its relationship with Pakistan. Despite convergence of immediate regional and global interests, Blinken noted during congressional hearing that some of Pakistan's interests in Afghanistan are in conflict with ours. Contrary to American ambivalent rhetoric, Pakistan as a responsible regional actor vehemently facilitated the Afghan peace settlement to materialize smooth U.S. departure. Earlier, a senior U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham described American President Joe Biden's reluctance to reach out to Premier Imran Khan as stunning and warned that ignoring Pakistan while withdrawing from Afghanistan could lead to a disaster. U.S. have historically envisioned ties with Pakistan from narrow geopolitical prism instead of establishing sustainable, broad-based partnership. The focus of Pakistan government's foreign policy has shifted from geopolitics to geoeconomics. A new economic security paradigm rests upon three central pillars of peace, development partnerships, and connectivity. Thus, Premier Imran Khan categorically emphasized that Pakistan could be partners with the United States in peace, but never in conflict. Owing to tectonic shifts in regional order, time is ripe to reorient Pakistan-US ties from narrow security prism towards close economic cooperation, enhanced regional security, and common vision for a peaceful South Asia. A peaceful, prosperous South Asia is in the interest of all and is the reason why the US should keep Pakistan's concerns in mind while developing regional policies.
My first guest in today's program is Dr. Karl from University of Akron, United States. Dr. Karl, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Karl, we are today discussing the statement by the Secretary of State who just said that there is a conflict of interest with regards to Afghanistan between Pakistan and United States. What do you conclude from these remarks? What are exactly these conflicts of interest?
So it's really nothing new for a U.S. official to say this. There have been conflicts of interest between the United States and Pakistan for several years. I think it's a particularly blunt statement, but it's not the first time this has been said. The conflicts of interest really have to do with what Pakistan sees as beneficial to Pakistan's security, and then what the United States sees as beneficial to its security. And Pakistan sees an Afghanistan governed by a friendly government as in its interests. And so the Taliban is clearly a friendlier government to Pakistan than the government of Ashraf Ghani. For the United States, the opposite is true. It would have been better had Ghani stayed in power and the Taliban had not come to power. So this is a genuine conflict between what the United States and what Pakistan wants. Now, the United States would like to see its citizens withdrawn from Afghanistan as quickly as possible. I don't think that's in conflict with the Pakistanis want, but I think one of the main issues will be recognition of the Taliban government. What level of recognition will the United States give? I think it's pretty clear that the Pakistani government would like as much recognition as possible. So we'll see how that works out.
Dr. Karl, do you agree that most of the fears with regards to Taliban have not turned out to be true, because ever since they have risen to the power, there have not been any such things that can be pointed out as being blatantly against the human rights criteria that the United States has set for so many countries, or anything that we can specifically point out to be against the international protocol of treatment of people, generally women and minorities?
Well, I think there's a much more important issue in U.S. foreign policy towards Afghanistan. Not to say that the treatment of women or minorities or other issues in Afghanistan are not important for American foreign policy, but the really crucial issue here is security. And for the United States, the rise of the Taliban to power, the way it came about, and I would say more importantly, the relationships the Taliban has with militant groups, terrorist groups, is very concerning for the United States, in particular the relationship between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. That is something that has not weakened over time. That is a really big concern into the future, that Al-Qaeda will strengthen in Afghanistan. And so this could be a very big source of contention between the United States and Pakistan, because Pakistani government has kind of downplayed the relationship between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, whereas in the United States that's considered a very, very important issue when it comes to how the United States views Afghanistan.
Dr. Karl, when it comes to Al-Qaeda or other factions like ISIK, we have recently seen that when Kabul airport was attacked, it was Taliban that took the brunt of it, because it was under their administrative control. And Taliban have so far not shown any symptoms or any signs of showing patronage of these factions or doing something to bring them under their own umbrella. So are there any specific reasons for United States to be at this point in time concerned about Taliban patronizing or giving shelter to Al-Qaeda or to factions like ISIK, particularly when they are now in charge of all the territory, more than what they had back in 2001?
Well, there's a significant difference between Al-Qaeda and ISIS-K. ISIS-K is not allied with the Taliban or with Al-Qaeda. In fact, ISIS-K is enemy of both groups. So you really need to treat the Taliban relationship with Al-Qaeda very separately to the relationship the Taliban has to ISIS-K. So I think there's little chance that ISIS-K and the Taliban will anytime soon become allied or develop a friendlier relationship. But having said that, there still is a very close relationship between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and it's unlikely that that's going to diminish or wither anytime soon. And so that's the really significant issue. There are other groups that have found refuge in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, but for the United States, the principal worry is really Al-Qaeda. Obviously, ISIS-K is considered threatening, but not to the level that Al-Qaeda is, because Al-Qaeda can easily grow. And this is the expectation, in fact, in the United States, is that Al-Qaeda will grow in numbers and in strength over time in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan.
And Dr. Karl, what do you personally believe would be America's interest in Afghanistan now? Would the United States want to see Taliban and their administration catastrophically failing, being economically stagnated, and coming to the point where a civil war breaks out? Or would they want the Taliban administration to be slightly successful and to use the carrot and stick strategy to keep the affairs of Afghanistan running, so that the country eventually gets out of the turmoil that it has been to for the last 40 years?
I do not think at all that the United States government has an interest in Afghanistan suffering from hardship. Clearly, it's not in U.S. interest to see the people of Afghanistan suffer, to watch the country devolve into chaos, civil war, things like that. very much it's the case that the United States government wants Afghanistan to be a thriving state, not a failed state. But having said that, the United States also doesn't want Afghanistan to become a launching pad for terror attacks as it was in the past. So the United States really intrinsically doesn't have an interest in watching the Taliban fall. What it does have is an interest in keeping al-Qaeda from being a threat to American security. There's no concern in Washington that the Taliban itself will threaten American security. The big concern is the Taliban relationship with al-Qaeda, and as long as that remains friendly, it will be difficult to have a normal relationship between the United States and the Taliban government.
The feeling here in Islamabad is that the United States, after its catastrophic failure to conclude the war in her favor, is now looking for a regional scapegoat. This is a major reason why Pakistan's role has not been acknowledged, particularly when we club it with the fact that President Biden is yet to speak with Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, despite that Pakistan has played a very significant role and it has been acknowledged by the United States theoretically. They have said over a number of occasions that without Pakistan, US forces could not walk out uninflicted. Now, do you agree with the statement, or do you believe there is a different perspective in Washington?
Well, I think there is something to be garnered from the fact that President Biden has not called Prime Minister Khan. I think it shows probably a certain degree of unhappiness with the role that Pakistan has played and what has transpired in Afghanistan. If you think about what the point of U.S. Taliban talks was, there was supposed to be a peace process that was meaningful. There was supposed to be a de-escalation of violence. There was supposed to become, some sort of a power-sharing agreement between the Taliban and Afghan government forces. And instead, all of that kind of fell apart, and the Taliban came to power very quickly through force of arms. So that's obviously not the outcome that the United States thought they were getting through negotiations. It's an open question how much President Biden or others in his administration blame Pakistan for that, whether they think Pakistan didn't deliver or not. But clearly there's been a consistent view in the United States, and not just with President Biden's administration, but with several administrations going all the way back until before 2001 and the attacks on the United States by al-Qaeda, that the Taliban have been supported by the Pakistani government, and this has been detrimental to American national security interests. So this has been a very tough relationship. It's a relationship that some in the United States characterize as a frenemy relationship. We're both friends and enemies of Pakistan simultaneously. Pakistan helps us on some things. On other things, Pakistan is not helpful to the United States. It'll be interesting to see into the future now that the Taliban have come to power, whether this gives an opportunity for Pakistan and the United States to improve its relationship. I think what'll be most important is what kind of relationship Pakistan has with the Taliban, whether it can moderate the Taliban, particularly do something about the Taliban's relationship with al-Qaeda. I know I keep coming back to this, but this is really the crux of the issue for the United States. If somehow the Taliban can distance itself from al-Qaeda and al-Qaeda is kept from rebuilding and threatening American national security interests, I think that will very much improve the relationship between the United States and Pakistan. So I wouldn't say that it's destined for its present trajectory or even getting worse. I think there are opportunities for the United States and Pakistan to improve their relations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaul, for being a guest in my program. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join with second segment of the program. Stay with us.
Islamabad, the capital city.
Welcome back. In the second segment of the program, I have with me Dr. Vaqar Ahmed, who's a renowned economist and also the executive director of SDPI. Doctor, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Shabahat.
Doctor, we are today discussing the economic impact of the trajectory of relationship between Pakistan and the United States, which is currently downward, and its overall impact on Pakistan's economy. These days, we are also seeing that the rate of rupee is devaluating against US dollar. We also saw that Pakistan, despite being extremely compliant on FATF, was not taken out of the grey list. Can you shed some light on the impact that United States has on Pakistan's economy?
Thank you, Shabahat Sahab. And I think you've rightly said that there is some lack of imagination on part of the U.S. in really reimagining, rethinking this relationship with Pakistan, which is so important in the current regional context. Now, if you look at the current economic relations of Pakistan with Afghanistan, we have almost around 6 to 7 billion of trade with U.S., depending upon the year we talk about. And out of this, Pakistan's exports to U.S. currently stand at $3 billion, which is quite a decent size. And we have enjoyed good business relations, and we are currently hosting almost 550 U.S. companies in Pakistan who are really earning good dividends from a good, decent domestic demand, consumer demand in Pakistan. And given that these U.S. companies have been doing so well in Pakistan, that they have pledged an almost $1.5 billion of FDI for the next year as well. And apart from this, there is a monthly flow of remittances from the U.S. as well, given that Pakistani skilled labor force is serving in U.S. And monthly flow is to the tune of around $300 million, which Pakistanis working in U.S. are sending back to Pakistan. So it's a very strong and very sort of a deep trade and investment sort of relationship which both countries enjoy. Somehow, however, this is not being complemented by an understanding on part of the U.S. to help with the structural reforms which Pakistan wishes to undertake in the financial sector, in the energy sector, even in the space of public finance, for example. And we continue to see some pressure or some interference by the U.S. when it comes to, for example, Pakistan accessing support from IMF and the donors.
And Doctor, does it concern you as an expert that Pakistan and the United States diplomatic relationship is not improving? I would not say it's worsening, but it's not improving. It's in a kind of a stalemate. Does it worry you as an economist? Do you see any implications of that going forward?
Absolutely, Shabahat Sahab, and it's almost like deja vu when the U.S. was pulling out of Afghanistan in late 80s, and suddenly the entire cooperation in investment, trade, military relations, everything just faded away, and it was so transactional in nature that you really didn't see even the development partners who are led by the U.S., even they did not come forward until after 9/11 that the U.S. required Pakistan support. What worries me further is that U.S. is continuing, or rather news coming out of the U.S. intelligentsia, that they are continuing to think that they can sort of pressurize Pakistan to do more. And you recently saw the editorial in Bloomberg was trying to guide the policymakers in the U.S. how to use FATF, Financial Action Task Force, and its compliance conditionalities as a tool against Pakistan. So it is that open that the interference or the sort of pressure which the U.S. can exert and impact the development goals of Pakistan, it's that sort of explicit now.
Dr. Donald Trump, the former president of United States, had brought some changes to the economic policies of United States towards Pakistan. That included, I would say, some sanctions or some cut on Pakistan's military and civilian aid. When Biden came to the power, we were expecting that things will change. Unfortunately, he continued to walk the same path. Now, how much has it impacted Pakistan as a country or as an economy?
Yes, I think certainly the impact has been there, given that just when Pakistan required civilian and military aid to sort of augment capacities against a fallout in Afghanistan or a civil war in Afghanistan, just when Pakistan required that, suddenly that support is not given by the U.S. and its allies. So certainly this is very worrisome. But I think what worries me more is that there is a clear lack of imagination that what happens next in Afghanistan, the world community recognizes. You have countries in the Gulf, countries in Central Asia, Russia, Beijing, who recognize that in the coming days, Pakistan's role or even other neighbors of Afghanistan, their role will be pivotal. And unless you augment their capacities through civilian and military aid, you are not only going to see a very, very disturbed and divided Afghanistan, but its spillover is bound to move into the neighborhood of Afghanistan as well. And I was surprised this is not worrying the U.S., given that it has stakes in Gulf, it has stakes in Central Asia, and I would like to believe that Biden administration has not done a deep reflection on where do they want to go from here, which is something very similar to what we saw in the Trump administration, that not done their homework in a very comprehensive manner.
Dr. Vaqar, after 20 years of occupation or 20 years of military presence in Afghanistan, the United States has finally left. And we are seeing that despite the fact that today Afghanistan is being controlled by one administration by and large, something that U.S. has not been able to accomplish in all these 20 years of her effort. There is a severe economic crisis in Afghanistan. We are seeing that the people are standing in long queues outside the banks. The government of Afghanistan has not been recognized. And things are moving in a bad direction when it comes to the economy. Now tell me how far Afghanistan is from a complete catastrophic economic collapse, and how probable do you see that if United States doesn't come forward to play a sympathetic role toward Afghanistan?
Yes, a very important question, Shabahat. I think this again goes back to the insensitivity of the Biden administration. The fact of the matter is that Afghan economy has effectively collapsed. This is what any economist will tell you. Their foreign exchange reserves have been blocked by the U.S., which is not the money of Taliban or any other administration. It's the money of Afghan people, which was committed to them. Second, if you look at the budget, government budget or fiscal finances of Afghanistan, 80% of that comes from development assistance, which has been curtailed or outrightly stopped. So now you have a government which hasn't got a budget to run its affairs, to manage its affairs. And on top of that, they don't have that space in the current account or balance of payments to afford outside imports, for example. Now, at a micro level, what has happened is this has given rise to extreme food insecurity. And given that people on the fringes or people in the rural areas were still able to use some buffer stocks, for example, which are fast depleting, only hope was that there would be they'll be able to use imported sources of food supplies in the coming days. That they cannot afford because their dollar supplies have been decreasing with the days, and they don't have access to their foreign exchange reserves. This in turn has also put additional pressure on the dollar reserves held by the neighboring countries, including Pakistan. You are seeing a pressure on dollar rupee parity because a large part of this dollar is being demanded by for example, Afghan refugees who are legally in Pakistan to send to their loved ones or near ones in Afghanistan, basically.
And Dr. Saab, also the fact that most of the trades now taking place, most of the imports of essentials that are taking place for Afghanistan, since Afghanistan does not have a recognized banking system at the moment, are being done by the importers based in Pakistan. Do you think it is also one of the reasons?
Absolutely, Shabahat. This is a reason, and I think this is where we wanted to see a more active role of United Nations. If you have a country collapsing and you're looking at a humanitarian crisis, you're looking at food insecurities taking place in pockets which are going to have far-reaching impacts on women and children. This is why United Nations is there as an institution, and somehow even the UN bodies, including the World Bank, for example, most of their programs have come to a halt. We are not seeing big announcements or plans to counter the current situation by organizations like UNDP or UNICEF, for that matter. And I think this is where we have to come in. In the longer term, Afghan economy is going to require much more support. They have trans-boundary projects like CASA 1000 and TAPI, which require that those guarantees by foreign donors, which will quickly fade away, and Afghanistan will lose that opportunity of trans-boundary cooperation with its neighbors, like Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, Pakistan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vaqar, for being as insightful as ever. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join with the last segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back. In the last segment of the program, I have with me Dr. Salma Malik from Quaid-e-Azam University. Dr. Salma, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting.
And we are today discussing the statement by the Secretary of State of United States, who said that there are multiplicity of interests between Pakistan and United States when it comes to Afghanistan. Help me to understand what are these conflict of interest that Pakistan or US might have in the new emerging Afghanistan.
Okay, thank you so much. I technically feel that the US exit from Afghanistan has actually brought a new chapter to the world history, because now the thrust is going to be more geo-economic than geostrategic. And in this geo-economic profiling of the new world order, or the new normal that is going to unfold, we would have China as a key regional actor and a key international economic actor. So it's a shift from geostrategic or geopolitical to geoeconomics. And that is something where the US feels that China is going to take precedence over the rest of the world, especially it is going to be a major competitor to the US interest. And in that, how the US perceives is that Pakistan is siding in this new emerging great game / Cold War / bipolarity that is unfolding in this geo-economic world with China. So Pakistan has shifted blocks, plus the fact that the US needs to put the blame of its unceremonious exit from Afghanistan on someone. And Pakistan has, in these 20 years, been the most convenient scapegoat, combined with the New Delhi and the Indian interest and the lobbying mechanism, we have a very well entrenched narrative that has craftily been built against Pakistan, in which the US and the Indians conveniently, for their own vested interest, are maligning Pakistan. And this is not something that I'm saying by spinning theories or spinning conspiracy doctrines or anything. This is an established fact. The US has nothing to show to its domestic constituency. It has nothing to show to the international world. It stands an extremely embarrassed superpower that has failed to deliver on even the minutest of the promises that it held to the international community and to the Afghans. It has totally failed the Afghans. Me being a woman, I would say that the US has failed the Afghan woman who was brave enough to stand ground and face all type of adversities in these 20 plus years. And because it has to blame someone, it is blaming Pakistan. So at least these are two interests that do not converge but conflict with each other. And plus, other than this, we also have situations where the US sees that China or Pakistan, through its CPEC, is going to be a more influential actor in Afghanistan. Pakistan is already.
Dr. Sahib, I'll cut you here. But before we proceed, we have to understand what exactly Blinken wanted to say when he said there are conflicts of interest. What does this statement mean diplomatically? I mean, is he loudly saying that Pakistan always wanted to have Taliban administration dealing with entire Afghanistan and United States never wanted to have it? Or are they trying to say that Pakistan wants the patronage of different outfits that are operating in Afghanistan? Theoretically speaking, we're not saying whether it's a fact or not. What does this statement mean? How do you decode that?
Okay, the way you decode such a statement primarily is, as I said, to A, cover its embarrassment, B, the fact that Pakistan from day one, even immediately after 9/11, was telling the US that not all the Taliban are belligerent, not all the Taliban are miscreants. Try and negotiate with those with whom you can have a dialogue, and they can be moderated into an active stakeholder. The US did not do that. The US only remained on making more corrupt Afghan politicians. And they totally misread what was happening in Afghanistan. And of course, the blame gaming was on Pakistan to do more, to do this, to do that. And again, today they face the similar situation. To put the record straight, Pakistan in the last several years, even prior to Doha, had been trying for as much an inclusivity of Afghan stakeholders in a future Afghan governance system as possible. Where at one hand, Pakistan was also trying that the international actors talk to the Taliban, incentivize them into acting like responsible stakeholders in Afghanistan's future. Pakistan very well knew that Afghanistan's future has the Taliban as an active agent of change. And this is something Pakistan, without any emotions, without any malice, without any vested interest, has been telling all its allies, friends, adversaries since ever. If anyone chooses not to listen to this particular notion, it is their fault, not Pakistan's. But the very
Dr. Salma
fact
Malik,
is the Taliban
how do you
did what
see
they did.
Dr. Salma,
Yeah.
I'll cut you here. We are short of time. So, how do you see Pakistan's increasing role in negotiations between Afghanistan and Central Asian Republic? As of now, when we are speaking, Pakistan's top leadership is in the Central Asia, bringing all these neighbors of Afghanistan together. Pakistan is still in the process, not dictating, not giving orders from 1,000 miles away or 10,000 miles away, but still constructing the small blocks to build a cohesion or an integrated Central Asia in Afghanistan's neighborhood. How do you see this effort of Pakistan, and do you believe this will help Afghanistan to be in better terms to negotiate with the United States in near future?
You see, the way I look at this particular phenomenon is both Pakistan, more Pakistan, and then Central Asia are immediate neighbors to Afghanistan, along with Iran. And if, God forbid, there is a major humanitarian crisis that unfolds in Afghanistan, given how the international community is responding to the Taliban administration at the moment, without realizing that the international community abandoned Afghanistan when it abandoned them, and as a result, the Taliban had no resistance and they have taken over Afghanistan. They have been giving the world signals and these um, messages that we don't mean trouble. We want to engage with you. What Pakistan is trying to do is to avert a major international humanitarian crisis from unfolding. God forbid if international community starts meddling in Afghanistan affairs, they sanction them, they withhold the money that the way they have done, the humanitarian crisis, the outflow of people from Afghanistan, given the health situation, the bad medical situation, financial situation, security situation, and if a civil war ensures, it is going to be on Pakistan and rest of the neighbors. What Pakistan is trying to plead to the world, including Central Asia, is to engage with the Afghan stakeholders so that we can avert a humanitarian crisis, make the Taliban administration realize that they have to act like responsible actors. We are not telling the Afghans to that this is an open play field for them. We are telling the Taliban that you have to abide by the international norms and standards. And if your performance indicators are good, then there is going to be a lot of positivity from the international community, including the regional actors, that is going to come. Already, few of the Central Asian states have given aid to the Afghan nationals, and they really require it. Afghanistan at the moment is in a very dire financial security situation, and with winters approaching, it is going to become worse. So
Dr. Saab,
Pakistan's
thank you very
main
much for
effort is
bringing this
on
up.
the
And this brings
humanitarian
me to
front.
a very important point. Now, there are more than $9.5 billion of Afghan assets being frozen abroad by United States. We don't know the reasons behind it. Apparently, they say that they do not recognize Taliban government, so they will not allow the liquidity to be transferred to Afghanistan. And now saying that the state of women rights is very important and is under the watch and would be a major factor that the United States would consider before recognizing Taliban's government. Now, as you said rightly, as you rightly pointed out, Afghan economy has entirely collapsed. The winters are approaching. We have this global pandemic, and Afghan economy is in shambles. Their only assets have been frozen by United States. All the assets they had, all the liquid assets they had, the so-installed puppet regime has taken abroad. Now, bringing more sanctions on Afghanistan or not coming to the financial rescue of Pakistan in the name of woman right, don't you think it's a bigger torture for the women of Afghanistan to be starving instead of being forced to put
Absolutely,
headscarves?
I totally agree with you, and I think it's a very double talk. You see, when the Doha Agreement was being signed, many of us in Pakistan, with whom the American administration would have deliberations, they spoke to us. One of the major points the women civil society members, including myself, would tell our American colleagues was that please be careful. Don't sign a security agreement that does not take into account A, basic human rights, B, civil society rights, C, and the most important, women rights. Women of Afghanistan have been an extremely brave people. I tell you, when I say it, you don't know what type of adversities they have faced in these 20 years to come to this point. Even during the Karzai government, in the initial instance, women were not being given their due right. They have fought for it. And when even at that time the American government incentivized monetarily the Karzai government to allow women a parliamentary quota, and then they entered into the Afghan parliament. So there's a need to do such things. By stopping this money, you're directly, indirectly, both affecting especially the women of Afghanistan, then their children, then the vulnerable north. You're taking away their livelihood, you're taking away their financial security, you're taking away health security. Women as care providers, all of these things are massively being hit because of this one action. And one thing that one cannot understand is that when Doha was signed, it was not an agreement that Americans did under duress. They signed this agreement with the Taliban. So why do not they understand what the Taliban are all about? If
Very
they didn't
rightly
sign
and
an
aptly
agreement
pointed
with
out.
them,
Dr. Malik,
then why
last
should they
question in the
negotiate
program.
with them?
Dr. Malik, we are short of time. Last question in the program. Being a critic or being an expert of American foreign policy, do you believe that United States going forward wants to see a successful government or a successful Afghanistan, let's not even name government, a financially viable, peaceful, coherent Afghanistan? Or would United States want to create an environment where the economy becomes so unviable that the society collapses, Afghan gets again into a civil war, and then the United States perhaps can justify that if we could not do it, nobody else can do it. How do you see this ambition behind the curtain, ambition of United States when it comes to Afghanistan? How do you foresee
If
that?
the US ambition is that we create civil unrest in Afghanistan, everything collapse, and they revert to Afghanistan, then they shouldn't have left Afghanistan in the first place. The second scenario is that if they were so much interested in a successful, viable, stable Afghanistan, they had 20 long years and a clean slate. They should have strengthened the grassroots institutions and societies and structures of Afghanistan to such an extent that they should have been self sustaining. They did not do that. What do we see today? As of 15th August, what we see is corrupt politicians leaving a country in dire straits with people brave and to face all the adversities with truckloads full of cash, liquid cash. What does that say? Are there brave people who are doing this? And where are these people going with all this truck full of money? To the Western capitals. So I'm sorry, I really don't have a clear answer in this regard, but my answer is in my ambiguity that if they
No, you
wanted a
just
stable
pointed it out.
Afghanistan, they should have strengthened the institutions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malik, again for being the guest in the program. Ladies and gentlemen, John David Dingell Jr., a veteran American politician who remained a member of American Parliament from 1955 to 2015, once said, "War is a failure of diplomacy." Since the diplomacy has failed in Afghanistan, we have to see if war remains to be the only option. Or does Pakistan and allies have the capacity to convince United States and other Western powers to start the diplomatic conversations again with Afghanistan to make Afghanistan a viable, vibrant, and healthy state? We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.